Hello. The Divine Code reading for March 22nd, pages 577 and 578. We are in the chapter, The Prohibition of Theft. Topic number 10. The above law, that would be topic number 9, that was discussing whether a person, if the owner of the store is not present in the store, or he's on the other side of the store, but he's not involved directly with the transaction. Can another person, either an employee, a trusted friend, or an associate, a person that's a acquaintance, do the transaction on behalf of the merchant? And generally, if assuming most stores operate with for cash, they trade merchandise for cash, then the rules are relaxed. But what if the buyer is, instead of bringing cash for his product, he wishes to barter and bring a different product in exchange for the product he wants from the store? So topic number 10, the above law refers to a situation in which the buyer's item is exchanged in equal value to the merchandise that he took, in the opinion of the merchant. For not all merchandise are equal in their opinion of the valued exchanged merchandise, and most want only money in exchange for a sale. Akanet Ephraim, Laws of Theft, Chapter 5, and Laws of Messengers, Chapter 20. Also, usually a person that runs a store, he's not interested in a direct exchange. He wants to make money, whatever the fair business practice is for him to make money in his store. He wants to buy something at a low price and sell it at a higher price. So if it's a direct thing, if the buyer is coming in with something, if the seller is selling something that's worth $100, and he wants to sell it for $100, the buyer comes in with something worth $100. That's the regular price for the item. With that, the store owner is not going to make money. The store owner wants to buy something at $80 and sell it for $100. That way the store owner makes money. That's the whole reason for having a store. And so what happens in this case? In either case. However, the buyer may intend to additionally benefit from the merchandise by exchanging, through a middleman who is trusted by the merchant, an item that is greater in value than the merchandise he is taking. This applies if it will bring profit to the merchant, and it seems clear that the merchant will be happy to gain this item that is slightly higher in value. And if this merchandise, and this is being done specifically in places that use such bartering and exchanges in the markets, and buyers pay with items they wish to give to the sellers. This is logical for regarding the matter that is a burden to a person and is not habitual. Although he will profit through it, it cannot be assumed that he will consent to it. Likewise, it is clear that this also depends on the type of profit being made. For example, a merchant of clothes is not interested in selling fruits or vegetables in the market, even though he will be able to make double the profit of the clothes he sells in his store. However, it can be assumed that he consents to expend a small amount of effort in order to sell a diamond worth thousands times his merchandise. So there's a lot of variables involved as to whether or not a merchant would be wanting to exchange the product. If it's the custom in that area to do bartering, then it makes it a lot easier to assume that the merchant would be willing to accept another item. The type of merchandise, if it's a hardware store and someone comes in with clothing, well, is the clothing the type of clothing the person might buy at the hardware store, or is it, things that have no relevance and the customers coming in are not going to be interested? So the buyer or the owner of the store would have a hassle in selling the items that don't fit his business model. And the other question is the amount of profit that the buyer can make from this. And there's so many different variables involved with that because we're dealing with wholesale versus retail pricing. What a person is willing to bring in versus what he would expect to sell it for, it varies tremendously with the different types of merchandise. So all these factors have to be taken into account. The major factor is whether or not this is something that the store owner normally does. If he normally does it, then the rules are more relaxed. If it's not something he normally does, and it's going to be a major transition in his mind to exchange it as such, then it would be a stricter question in such a case. And we're not talking about where the owner and the buyer are face to face. We're talking about the owner is somewhere else, and we have a store clerk or a close friend or a acquaintance that's handling the exchange. With these conditions, and if time is of the essence, and the matter is pressing, or for a great need, such as a sick person who needs the merchandise for health reasons. And the rules are always looser if there's an urgency to it, especially if there's a health urgency. Or there's other kinds of urgencies also, like the person is needs the merchandise for some urgent need. Then there's more of a relaxed approach to the question of bartering. But the owner is not present to agree to the sale and the exchange. Then the permission of the buyer to benefit the merchant by making the exchange and leaving it in the care of the middleman, whom the merchant trusts with such matters. In this scenario, there is no theft or extortion involved. So there's the different questions. The first question is whether or not the sale is legally binding. The other question, in this case, where there's no theft or extortion involved, means the sale is pending. It's not binding. It's pending. But if it turns out that the buyer does not agree to it, if the seller does not agree to it, or either side decides they do not agree to it, even though it is not binding, if the person that took the merchandise, the buyer that came into the store and took the merchandise and exchanged it for some other merchandise, would not be considered a thief. In a criminal court, he would not be considered a thief if he, on good faith, made the exchange. But the exchange is still pending at this point. Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat 359.2, Shulchan Aruch Harav, Laws of Robbery, Topic 2. This is only permissible when there is almost no doubt that the merchant will consent to the sale, at which point we say that he is surely benefiting from this, and that it is a valid sale. If not, it is forbidden. Therefore, permission is not given for this only when it is done Therefore, permission is given for this only when it is done openly and not in a secretive manner. So the person is doing this exchange, and he's doing it through a middleman, the store clerk or the friend or the acquaintance. He's doing it openly. He's not sneaking around, taking one type of merchandise, putting another type of merchandise on the shelf and walking out with it. He's doing it in front of everybody, and he's got the middlemen involved, and the middlemen will discuss it with the merchant when the merchant returns. Note that permission is given In Chokanor Karav, Laws of Found Objects, topic 5, for a household member to give food to a poor person if the standard practice for the master of the house is to allow this. It is sufficient for the master of the house to have general knowledge and consent that this is the policy, even if he doesn't know about and consent to a specific occurrence. In summary, a person only has permission to take a belonging without the owner's knowledge if the owner has revealed previously that in any situation or in this particular situation he would consent to this item being taken, such as the food item from his house or fruit from his orchard. It is also important to consider whether the owner applies this consent to everyone or only to some specific people. So if the merchant has a policy that he allows these kind of transactions, or the merchant has a policy that certain merchandise it can be exchanged, or the merchant has a policy that certain people he has this kind of a relationship with and other people he doesn't, then that needs to be openly known, and then the middleman has the permission to do the transaction. However, if a person does not need the merchandise urgently and there's no pressing need, he should not take it by exchange without the knowledge of the merchant, who may not want the exchange even if it is worth more than his own merchandise. So if there's no policy involved, this is not a normal thing, the barter exchange, and there's no pressing need. I mean, if it's a consignment shop and people come in and out, making barters all the time, that might be acceptable. If it's in the kind of store or kind of a business where this is normal activity, someone comes in with certain items and they leave with other items, and that's how the business operates, then there's no question that it's acceptable within, as long as the person is trusted who is doing the middleman. But if it's not a normal thing and there's no pressure at that moment that the person really needs the item for health benefits or some other pressing need, then it can wait until the transaction waits until the merchant, the owner of the item, is able to make the decision. He should not take it by exchange or even without the knowledge of the merchant, who may not want an exchange even if it is worth more than his merchandise. Za Koshan Mishpat, chapter 359, follows the opinion of Marshall that one cannot appropriate a credit or benefit from another person in such a case without his knowledge. So unless he knows that the merchant is accepting of an exchange for his merchandise, there is a possibility of extortion involved. However, if one leaves proper payment or ready money in place of an item for sale, the merchant is surely happy about the sale, and it seems to be completely permissible from the onset, since it is surely beneficial to the owner. This difference is the reason for the separation in topics 9 and 10. So if it's product, I mean, unless it's established ahead of time that he accepts certain merchandise in exchange, but normally it would not be binding unless the merchant is able to be involved in the exchange. But if it's money that's involved, because currency can be readily exchanged, then and it's regularly accepted for transaction. If a person walks into a hardware store, if he walks into a clothing store, if he walks into a food store, the same currency is operative in all these cases. So exchanging currency for the product is acceptable on because it's universally accepted, as opposed to merchandise being exchanged for the product because that's not as universally accepted. And so because it varies, then the owner would have to be involved in order for it to be a final sale. It appears that in this case, when the buyer exchanged an I'm sorry, it is superfluous to mention that if the merchant is present, then the buyer is permitted to carry out such an exchange only with the owner's awareness and permission. This is implied from the Sefer Mirat Eliam Koshan Mishpat 359:8. So if the merchant is standing there, it would still have to be with permission of the merchant. The merchant is standing there in front of the whole thing. There has to be an acknowledgement on behalf of the merchant. If the merchant says, no, I don't accept this, then obviously it would mean that it's not a valid exchange. It appears that in this case, when the buyer exchanged an item of higher value than the merchandise he took, even though it is permitted to do so, since we assume that it is for benefit of the merchant, and therefore he would agree to it. Nevertheless, if the merchant later protests that when the exchange becomes known to him, saying that he did not want the exchange, then the buyer must return the merchandise that he took if he still has it intact within his possession. This is implied from Gizot Ha Koshim Mishpat 359:1. See Encyclopedia Talmudica, volume 12, pages 137-8 and 138, with references to the authorities who write this: that even though it is the rule that one can benefit another person without his knowledge, this is only based on a general assumption that the person appreciates it. But the person protests the benefit, in this case, the exchange. It is clear that it is not considered that the acquisition was made, even if the extra value was given in his favor. It appears that regarding the barter of merchandise, we make an exception that if one party shows discontent with the barter, the exchange is voided. However, regarding payment in cash, which everyone is content to receive as payment, the merchant leaves an object in a store for sale with a clear intention that he wishes to sell it at a specific price, and ready money payment is considered as having his consent. Then the merchant cannot invalidate the sale. So if it's the person is doing bartering, then the person that is the active person in the bartering it's considered acceptable as long as it's done in the open and it's done with the it's done in the assumption publicly and done in the assumption that it'll benefit the owner of the merchant of the owner of the store. It's not considered theft, and it's considered a tentative sale until the owner decides whether, if the owner of the store looks at what was exchanged and said, I don't want this, then it invalidates it. However, if the owner of the store, if the buyer buys with cash, that the owner of the store put a sign up saying he's selling the product for $100, the buyer comes in with $100, pays for it, That's not considered bartering. That's considered cash, and the person paid for it in the acceptable manner that's universally accepted. Whereas bartering is a tentative until it's accepted by the buyer or by the seller. If he no longer has it intact. Okay, so if if the owner of the store decides he's not happy with what was bartered, that would invalidate the sale. As long as he says it right away, it invalidates the sale, and the person who purchased it through barter has to return what they have to return each other's product. If the buyer is not able to return it, if he turned around, if he consumed the medicine, for example, he bought medicine, he bartered it, he needed the medicine really bad, he didn't have the cash, so he brought in a something worth $100 for medicine that cost $10. He figured the owner will be overjoyed. The owner says he's not overjoyed. Then he has to return it, but he can't return the medicine that he already took. If he already consumed the medicine, then he can't return it. Then he must pay for it with money, and the item he wished to exchange is returned to him intact. So the person came in with merchandise worth $100 for the medicine that cost $10. The owner of the store says, "No, I didn't want this merchandise worth $100. I want $10 cash." Then the person would have to return the $10, and the merchandise that was worth $100 is returned to the buyer. So they invalidate the original sale, and they go through with the original intention of the owner of the store. But if the buyer paid for it with cash and the transaction was conducted through another person whom the merchant trusts, the owner may not cancel the sale, whereas it is accepted regarding monetary transactions that the buyer paid money and received his merchandise. It is impossible for either the buyer or the seller to cancel the transaction without the consent of the other party. So if the person came in with $10, bought the medicine, the owner of the store comes back and for who knows what reason decides he doesn't want the transaction. Well, he's already paid for it with the stated price, and the owner cannot unilaterally uh, invalidate the sale. But if the buyer agrees, then they can invalidate the sale together. But it has to be a mutual agreement. Thank you.